Hello and welcome to section 7.2. Here are the solutions for 7.1. You guys had to do some graphing last night. If you guys have any questions on your graphing, please let me know. This is the one, number 33, where I said just solve the equations for y. So what I was looking for is that you guys come up with that and that right there. Graphing those are a disaster. And so like I said, I'm going to show you guys an easier way to do that in the upcoming sections. Alright, we're going to get into 7.2, solving linear systems by substitution. You're going to learn an algebraic method. So instead of having to graph these all the time, we're going to learn a much more efficient method. Before we start though, why is it easy to find x in the equation, x plus 8 equals 10? Well, the reason why it's easy is because we can just subtract 8 and get x by itself. There's only one variable. The problem with what we're doing right now is we have two variables. We have y and an x. We can't get one of the numbers by itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an equation with only one variable in it. We're going to be using this thing called substitution. It's no different than if I have, let's say, 2x plus 8, and I say x equals 5. You can take the 5, plug it in for x, and do 2 times 5 plus 8, and then you can solve this equation or this expression. We're going to be doing something similar to that. What we're going to do is y is equal to this here. And we're going to take that and we're going to plug it in for the y down there. So instead of plugging in a number in for a letter, we're going to plug in an expression in for a number. So 2x plus, and then I'm going to take out the y now and replace it with 2x minus 1. And when I make the substitution, I'm always going to put in parentheses. Use parentheses for the substitution. Otherwise, you're likely going to make a mistake. Now, it doesn't happen on this one because there's nothing to distribute, but I'll explain where that would play a role here in a second. So this allows me to solve this equation for x by doing some algebra. So basically what I did here, I'll kind of walk through this. I'm just doing a bunch of algebra right now. X equals 1. Basically what I did here is I took two equations with two unknowns, x and y, and I created one equation with one unknown, in this case x. And then I solved that equation for x. Now I still need to find out what y is. So y is equal to 2x minus 1, and I know that x equals 1. So I can replace the x with a 1 by substituting that in. So 2 minus 1, y equals 1. So the ordered pair 1, 1 is my answer. If I were to graph these two lines on graph paper, that's where that line is going to cross. Here's another example. So now this time x is by itself. We're going to place that x there. And this is where the parentheses matters. So we're going to replace the x with y plus 3. Then we're going to write the entire equation over. And this time we actually have something to distribute here, 2y plus 6. That's why we need those parentheses there. So 2y minus y is 1y. And then subtract 6, y equals negative 1. So this time we actually found y first. Now we're going to go find x. So x equals negative 1 plus 3. I'm going to take the y, which we know was negative 1. We just found that out. And then simplify. So 2. So your answer is 2. Negative 1. And that's substitution basically. I'm not going to do this one because this one, if I solve this for x, which is what I'd want to do, x equals 8, and then you can just plug 8 back in. So that one's actually really not really, this one only has one variable in it, so that's really not a tricky question. Here are some steps. I'm not going to go over these. However, if you want to pause the video and write these steps down, you're more than welcome to. I'm just going to solve a couple more questions for you guys. I'm not going to solve this one because there's nothing different about that one. I am going to solve this one. Notice how here x and y, x or y isn't by itself. So step number 1 is solve either equation for x or y. In this case, I'm going to get the x by itself. So I'm going to add 2y because it's really easy to get x by itself. You can choose. It doesn't matter. X equals 2y plus 6. Then you're going to take that, plug it in for x. So 4 times 2y plus 6 plus 6y equals 4. And then distribute here. Make sure you're using your parentheses. and then we can solve this equation for y. Alright, so 8y and 6y is 14y. And I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. Normally, I get a whole number for these problems, and I'm realizing that I made a mistake. You can get fractions, and I definitely made a mistake. I missed that negative sign there. So that should be a negative, and that should be a negative 24. So I'd add 24 on both sides, and that'd be 28. Is it possible to get a fraction for an answer? Yes, it is. But a lot of times in this textbook, you get nice numbers. So that's kind of a red flag that I caught that early on. What would have happened if I continued to solve the question and then I plugged my answer back in, it wouldn't have worked. So as long as you're checking your answers, so that should be a -6. As long as you check your answers at the end, you'll catch any mistakes within the algebra. Okay, so I need to find x yet, and I just found out that y was 2, so x equals 2 times 2 minus 6, or 4 minus 6, or -2. So x equals -2, so my answer is -2, comma 2. Make sure you write your x first. If this one I'm solving for one of the variables, I would solve for y, because y is almost by itself. You could add x on both sides, and then you have y equals x plus 8. Then you'd make your substitution. So kind of be choose the variable to solve for if you have to. In this case, they're both solved for an x or a y. You can choose either substitution. I would plug this in for x here because it's less work. If you plug this in for y, you have to distribute the -4. So you can sometimes have a choice. Here's your assignment. Let me know if you guys have any questions with substitution. I'll definitely go over an example or two with you guys in class, as this section is a little abstract. But once you learn the process, it's pretty straightforward. Thank you guys for tuning in to